The Forgotten Species. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Confederation stretched across an artificial planetoid, its transparent dome revealing the glittering stars beyond. Representatives from over 300 species occupied tiered seats arranged in perfect mathematical harmony, a physical manifestation of the order they had maintained for 12,000 years. In the furthest tier, tucked away in a corner designed for the newest and least significant members, sat the human delegation. Captain Ilara Chen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Though designed to accommodate dozens of different physiologies, the chair remained stubbornly uncomfortable for human anatomy. A fitting metaphor, she thought, for humanity's place in galactic society. "The representative from Earth wishes to address the council again," announced the moderator, a gaseous being suspended in an anti-gravity field. The being's tone conveyed polite boredom. Ilara stood, straightening her Navy uniform with the Earth Defense Force insignia. "Thank you, honored moderator. I must again bring to the Council's attention the disappearance of 17 outposts along the Perseus Arm. These aren't simple communication failures. Entire colonies have gone silent. Perhaps their communication equipment has malfunctioned," suggested Delegate Sox, an ancient crystalline entity whose race had achieved spaceflight before humans had discovered agriculture. "Your species is always so quick to assume the worst." Ripples of amusement passed through the chamber. The sound of 300 different species laughing created a dissonant symphony. "With respect, Delegate," Ilara continued, "our analysis shows a pattern. Whatever is causing these disappearances is moving methodically inward toward the galactic core. Earth requests that the Confederation dispatch an investigative fleet with military capabilities." Military. The word was almost spat by Delegate Moore of the Linthori Collective. "The Confederation has not needed military vessels for 7 millennia. We are a peaceful society." "Peace achieved through understanding and diplomacy," added another delegate, "not through your primitive human concepts of force." Ilara clenched her jaw. Humanity had joined the Confederation just 30 years ago, after their first faster-than-light drive had drawn the attention of galactic civilization. In those 3 decades, humans had been consistently dismissed as violent, paranoid, and primitive. Their shorter lifespans, barely a century compared to the millennia enjoyed by elder races, made them seem impetuous and rash. "The motion to dispatch an investigative fleet with defensive capabilities is denied," the moderator announced. "Instead, we will send a diplomatic envoy to reestablish communication with the affected systems." As Ilara returned to her seat, her communications officer leaned over. "Captain, we just received an encrypted message from Earth Command. Dr. Wade has found something." On the research station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. Marcus Wade hunched over his console, gray hair disheveled from running his hands through it too many times. When Captain Chen's hologram appeared above his desk, he barely looked up. "Captain, I've been digging through the historical archives the Vinteri shared with us. I found mentions of an entity called the Collective that appeared at the edges of the galaxy approximately 30,000 years ago." "The Collective?" Ilara asked. "What are they?" "Not what. Who. According to these records, they were a hive mind species that consumed resources and assimilated other races. The accounts are fragmented. Most historical documents from that era were lost during what the Vinteri call the Great Darkness. But what's clear is that something devastated galactic civilization 30 millennia ago, and the Confederation barely survived. Why haven't they mentioned this to us? Because it happened so long ago that most species consider it myth," Marcus explained. "Only the longest-lived races, like the Vinteri and Linthori, might have institutional memory of it, and even they treat it as ancient history, like we might view stories about Atlantis or the Library of Alexandria. But you think the Collective is real? And back?" "I think the pattern of these disappearances matches the historical accounts exactly. The Collective appears at the galaxy's edge, consumes resources, and moves inward methodically." Marcus pulled up a star map showing red markers where colonies had gone silent. "Look familiar?" Ilara's face hardened. I'll bring this to the council immediately. They won't listen, Marcus warned. They haven't experienced existential threat in thousands of years. They've forgotten what it feels like. Then what do you suggest? We prepare, quietly, because if I'm right, the Confederation is about to remember what it's like to fight for survival. The diplomatic vessel Unity approached the Terrassi system with shields down and weapons offline, as per Confederation protocol. The sleek ship, crewed by representatives from 12 different species, broadcasted peace messages in all known languages. In the observation deck, the Vinteri diplomat Tella watched the approaching planet with 6 eyes blinking in sequence. The Terrassi colony had gone silent 3 days ago. As one of the eldest species in the Confederation, the Vinteri had been chosen to lead this diplomatic mission. We are receiving no response to our hails, reported the communications officer, a methane-breathing Helverin. Continue broadcasting, Tella ordered. Perhaps their equipment is damaged. A junior officer entered the deck, approaching with the characteristic fluid motion of his aquatic species. Ambassador, we've detected debris in orbit. Tella's expression remained impassive, though 2 of her eyes narrowed slightly. What kind of debris? Analysis suggests pieces of defense satellites and orbital habitats. A cold silence fell over the bridge. Magnify the planet's surface, Tella ordered after a moment. The view screen zoomed in on the once vibrant colony. Where cities had stood, only craters remained. The lush purple vegetation had been stripped away, leaving bare earth. The Terrassi system had been home to 80 million sentient beings. By the first light, whispered someone. Full scan, Tella commanded, her voice tight. Search for survivors. Before the scan could complete, the sensor officer's console erupted with alerts. Multiple objects approaching from behind the moon. They're moving fast. Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Open a channel, Tella ordered. This is Ambassador Tella of the Galactic Confederation. We come in peace end. The transmission died as a beam of energy sliced through the Unity's hull. Emergency shields flickered to life too late. As the ship broke apart, its distress beacon activated, broadcasting the sensor data and final moments to Confederation frequencies. The message reached the council chamber during a debate about trade routes. The recording of the Unity's destruction played on the main display, bringing absolute silence to the normally bustling chamber. In the shocked aftermath, Captain Chen rose from her seat. Honored delegates, in light of this attack, I move that the Confederation establish a defense force immediately. Earth offers its military expertise and vessels as the foundation. Military expertise. Delegate Moore scoffed, though with less conviction than before. You propose we respond to violence with violence. I propose we defend ourselves, Ilara replied. The entity that destroyed the Unity wasn't interested in dialogue. It didn't respond to peace offerings or diplomatic overtures. It attacked without provocation. Perhaps the Unity violated some unknown cultural taboo, suggested another delegate. By existing. Ilara's voice hardened. Look at the scan data. The Terrassi colony was stripped of resources, biomass, minerals, everything. This wasn't a cultural misunderstanding. This was consumption. The moderator floated forward. The human representative makes a compelling argument. However, the Confederation has no military protocols in place. We would need time to establish command structures, train personnel. We don't have time, Ilara interrupted. Earth can provide trained personnel and ships immediately. We've maintained a defense force despite the Confederation's discouragement. How unsurprising, murmured Delegate Sox, but the usual derision was absent from his tone. I propose an emergency measure, said a new voice. All eyes turned to Elder Vinturi, one of the oldest beings in the chamber. Let the humans establish a temporary defense force. If, as I suspect, this is indeed the return of the collective, we will need their unique perspectives. You can't be serious, Delegate Moore protested. Giving military authority to the most aggressive species in the Confederation. The most aggressive species, Elder Venturi replied calmly, "Maybe exactly what we need to face a predator." Before the council could vote, emergency alerts sounded throughout the chamber. The main display showed a Confederation core world, Helios Prime, under attack. The same unknown vessels that had destroyed the Unity now swarmed the planet by the hundreds. The Helios defense grid, designed to deter smugglers and pirates, collapsed within minutes. As the council watched in horror, the attackers began systematically stripping the planet of resources. "Evacuation protocols," shouted the moderator. "All available ships to Helios Prime." 3 hours later, Captain Chen's vessel, the Horizon, arrived at Helios Prime alongside 24 Earth military ships and a hastily assembled fleet of Confederation vessels. The scene was chaos. Civilian ships fleeing in all directions, the enemy vessels continuing their methodical harvest of the planet. "Target the enemy ships closest to the evacuation routes," Ilara ordered. "All vessels execute pattern Alpha 3. The Earth ships broke formation, each attacking from different vectors in an unpredictable pattern that confused the enemy vessels accustomed to the Confederation's organized algorithmic approaches. "They're adapting," reported Ilara's tactical officer as the enemy ships began to coordinate their response. "Switching to target our engines specifically." "Execute pattern Omega," Ilara commanded. "All ships engage evasive protocols and continue providing cover for civilian vessels." In the observation deck of the council ship, delegates watched in astonishment as the human vessels darted between enemy ships, drawing fire away from civilian transports while inflicting targeted damage on enemy vessels. "Their tactics are chaotic," observed Delegate Sox. "Unpredictable," corrected Elder Venturi. "The humans aren't following predetermined patterns. They're adapting in real time, each captain making independent decisions while coordinating toward a common goal." "It's primitive," Delegate Moore said, but his tone held a new note: respect. "It's effective," Elder Venturi replied simply. When the battle ended, 30% of the civilian population had been evacuated. 12 Earth vessels had been destroyed, their crews sacrificing themselves to allow more civilians to escape. The enemy, the Collective, as Dr. Wade's research had named them, had lost 17 ships but maintained control of the planet. In an emergency session following the battle, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to establish a defense force under human leadership. Species that had looked down on humans for decades now turned to them with desperate hope. As Ilara stepped onto the council platform, no longer relegated to the distant tiers, she felt the weight of 300 species expectations. "Captain Chen," the moderator addressed her formally, "the Confederation entrusts you with its defense. What are your orders?" Ilara looked out at the assembly, at the beings who had dismissed humans as primitive and paranoid for 3 decades. Now they looked to those same qualities as their salvation. "First," she said, "we need to understand our enemy. Dr. Wade will lead a research team combining knowledge from all Confederation archives. Second, we mobilize every ship with defensive capabilities. Third," her eyes hardened, "we teach you how to fight." The chamber, which had buzzed with polite dismissal when she had first warned them, now fell into solemn silence. The galaxy was at war, and the species they had feared least would lead them into battle. The human advantage. The training hangar aboard the Confederation station Nexus Prime echoed with the sounds of frustration. Captain Ilara Chen watched as representatives from 24 species attempted to master basic combat maneuvers. Most had never held weapons before. "They're not fighters," commented Commander Jackson, her second in command. 10,000 years of peace has bred it out of them." "They don't need to be natural fighters," Ilara replied. "They just need to survive long enough for tactics to make a difference." Across the hangar, a Limtheri officer dropped his weapon for the 3rd time, his 12-fingered hands struggling with equipment designed for human grip. Nearby, a methane breather struggled to coordinate movement in the combat exosuit that would allow them to fight alongside oxygen breathers. "Captain," Jackson lowered his voice, "with all due respect, We'd be better off using only human crews, our ships, our personnel. There are 7 trillion sentient beings in Confederation space. Commander, Ilara cut him off. Earth can contribute maybe a few thousand ships and 1 million soldiers. We need everyone, even if they slow us down. Ilara's eyes narrowed, especially then. The collective adapts quickly to patterns. Our best advantage is unpredictability. Different species thinking differently, moving differently, fighting differently. What looks like chaos to you is actually our greatest strength. Before Jackson could respond, Ilara's communicator chimed. Captain, Dr. Wade requests your presence in the research lab. The research laboratory spanned an entire deck of Nexus Prime. Dr. Marcus Wade had assembled scientists from across the Confederation, each bringing their species' unique knowledge and perspective. Amid the cacophony of different environmental chambers, translation devices, and specialized equipment, Marcus stood at a central holographic display, arguing with a Vinteri researcher. Captain, Marcus greeted Ilara as she approached. We've been analyzing the sensor data from the Helios attack. I believe we've identified something crucial. The hologram showed an enemy vessel, its dark hull pulsing with sinister energy. The collective ships aren't just similar, they're identical, down to the quantum level. And they move in perfect synchronization, adjusting tactics simultaneously. A hive mind, Ilara said, just like the historical record suggested. Yes, but with a critical weakness. Marcus manipulated the display, highlighting energy patterns emanating from the ships. They communicate through quantum entanglement, perfect instantaneous coordination, but these signature patterns suggest periodic synchronization events, moments when the individual units align their consciousness. The Vinteri scientist, Kelvos, stepped forward. My ancestors fought the collective 30 millennia ago. Our oldest archives speak of a weapon, a disruption device that could sever the connection between units temporarily. But the knowledge was lost. Not lost, Marcus corrected, just forgotten. The principles are sound. We've been developing a quantum disruptor that could, in theory, break the synchronization. In theory, Ilara questioned. We'd need to test it directly on a collective ship, Marcus admitted, and it would only work at close range. Ilara studied the schematics, so we'd need to get a ship close enough to deploy it manually. A suicide mission, Kelvos stated bluntly. Not necessarily, Ilara replied, just a very dangerous one. As they discussed the possibilities, an alarm sounded. The collective had attacked another system, this time closer to the Confederation core. In the hastily established war room, Admiral Joe of Earth Defense Force reviewed the tactical situation with representatives from 12 species. The holographic display showed the collective's advance, methodical, relentless, consuming resources from each system before moving to the next. They're not just taking, observed a Halorian scientist. They're learning. Each world they consume adds to their knowledge base, which explains why they target information repositories first. Admiral Joe agreed. Knowledge is as much a resource to them as materials. Ilara studied the map. They're avoiding direct confrontation with our stronger forces, targeting vulnerable systems instead. Classic asymmetric warfare. Like what we've been teaching, Commander Jackson noted. Because it works, Ilara replied. Admiral, I believe our next step should be clear. We need intelligence. We need to capture a collective ship, or at least enough of one to test Dr. Wade's disruptor. The gathered representatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. You're suggesting a capture mission? Asked a Linthuri commander. Against an enemy that has shown no mercy. I'm suggesting we fight like humans, Ilara replied, her voice hardening. We study our enemy, we find their weaknesses, and we exploit them. The collective adapts quickly, but so do we. 3 days later, Ilara stood on the bridge of the horizon, commanding a task force of 30 ships, a mix of human vessels, and those from newer Confederation species willing to adopt aggressive tactics. They lurked in the debris field of a destroyed mining outpost, waiting. Scanners detecting collective activity in the outer system, reported the sensor officer. Single ship, likely a scout. Perfect, Ilara said. All vessels maintain position. Remember the plan. We need to disable, not destroy. As the collective scout entered the debris field, following the energy signatures of abandoned mining equipment, the task force remained hidden, power systems minimized. The scout moved methodically, harvesting materials and scanning for usable technology. It's entering the kill box, Jackson reported. On your mark, Captain. Ilara waited until the scout passed the precise center of their formation. Execute. Simultaneously, 5 ships activated powerful gravity generators, creating a localized distortion that prevented the scout from jumping to faster-than-light speed. The remaining vessels emerged from hiding, targeting the scout's propulsion and communication systems with surgical precision. The scout responded immediately, its weapon systems reconfiguring to counter the attack. But before it could adapt fully, a specialized boarding craft launched from the horizon, attaching to the scout's hull. Boarding team reports successful penetration, Jackson announced. Deploying the disruptor now. On the main screen, the scout's energy patterns flickered, then stabilized at a lower frequency. It worked, Ilara breathed. The disruptor severed its connection to the hive. Boarding team reports the ship is partially inert, Jackson added. They're downloading data and collecting samples. Ilara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before reality reasserted itself. All ships, prepare for immediate withdrawal. The collective will investigate when this unit fails to report. As the task force retreated with their disabled prize, Dr. Wade's team began analyzing the captured technology and data. The information they extracted painted a grim picture. The collective was far larger than initially estimated, with thousands of ships approaching from intergalactic space. They consumed resources not just for sustenance, but to build more ships, expanding exponentially. Most disturbing was their purpose, revealed through fragmented data. The collective didn't just consume, they unified, absorbing conscious species into their hive mind, using organic neural patterns to enhance their processing capabilities. They're not just an invasion, Marcus explained during the emergency council meeting. They're a conversion. They see diversity as inefficient, individuality as waste. Their goal is to absorb all sentient life into a single collective consciousness. The council chamber erupted in panic, 300 species facing an existential threat to their very identity. But there's hope, Marcus continued once order was restored. The disruptor works. We've refined the design based on the captured technology. A large-scale version could potentially disrupt their entire network, if deployed at the center of their fleet. How do we deliver such a device? Asked the moderator. All eyes turned to Ilara. We fight our way in, she said simply. A direct assault on their command structure. Impossible, declared Delegate Moore. Their numbers are too great, their adaptation too quick. Not if we attack from multiple vectors, using different tactics from each approach, Ilara countered. The collective adapts quickly, but it can't optimize against contradictory strategies simultaneously. As debate raged about the feasibility of such an assault, an urgent communication interrupted. The collective had altered course. They were heading directly for Earth. They know, Marcus realized. They've identified humans as the strategic threat. Within hours, every available ship in the Confederation fleet converged on the Sol system. Earth had become the front line not by choice but by necessity. The planet's orbital defenses, maintained despite Confederation disapproval, were now its salvation. As the collective fleet approached, Dr. Wade made a startling discovery analyzing the captured data. They're not just targeting Earth randomly, he explained to Ilara. They want our neural patterns specifically. Human brains process information differently. We contextualize, we intuit, we make cognitive leaps. The collective wants to absorb that capability. So they're not just trying to eliminate the threat. Ilara realized. They're trying to assimilate it. The battle for Earth began at dawn. The collective arrived with hundreds of ships, but the combined Confederation fleet was waiting, a desperate last stand commanded by humans who had prepared for war their entire existence. What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. The collective attacked with mechanical precision, but the Confederation fleet responded with organized chaos, each species employing different tactics, different approaches, creating a battlefield too complex for the hive mind to fully predict. Earth's orbital defense platforms unleashed weapons that had been banned in Confederation space: kinetic kill vehicles, autonomous drone swarms, even weaponized gravity manipulation. Technologies developed in secret by a species that had never fully trusted the peace promised by the stars. "They're adapting," reported Jackson as the battle raged. "Targeting our command ships specifically." "As expected," Ilara replied calmly. "Execute contingency Hydra." Across the fleet, command functions decentralized, spreading across multiple vessels. When the collective destroyed a command ship, 3 more took over its functions, an approach the collective couldn't comprehend, accustomed as they were to centralized control. In the research vessel hovering behind Earth's moon, Dr. Wade and Kel Voss made the final adjustments to the quantum disruptor. "It's ready," Marcus announced, "but we still need to deliver it to the center of their fleet." Ilara's face appeared on the communication screen. "We've identified their command ship. It's coordinating the assault. If we can get your device there." "It's too heavily defended," Kel Voss observed. "No ship could penetrate their formation." "Not conventionally," Ilara agreed. "But what about unconventionally?" The plan came together quickly, desperate, dangerous, with minimal chances of success. Exactly the kind of plan that humans excelled at creating. 12 hours into the battle, with both sides suffering heavy losses, the Horizon detached from the main fleet, accompanied by ships from 7 different species. Each vessel had been modified, stripped down to increase speed and maneuverability. "Remember," Ilara addressed the mixed species strike team, "we only need 1 ship to get through with the disruptor. The rest of us provide distraction and cover." As the strike team accelerated toward the heart of the collective fleet, the main Confederation forces launched a massive barrage of conventional weapons, not to destroy, but to create a debris field that would confuse the collective sensors. The strike team split into multiple vectors, each taking a different approach toward the command ship. The collective, unable to determine which vessel carried the disruptor, was forced to divide its attention. "They're adapting," Jackson warned as the Horizon shuddered under enemy fire, concentrating attacks on all approaching vessels equally. "As expected," Ilara replied. "Initiate Phase 2. Across the battlefield, damaged Confederation ships that had appeared to be retreating suddenly changed course, deliberately colliding with collective vessels. Each kamikaze impact created more chaos, more unpredictability. The Horizon weaved through the carnage, taking heavy damage, but pressing forward. 3 other strike vessels kept pace, while the remainder fell to the collective's defenses. "Command ship in range," Jackson reported as the massive enemy vessel loomed ahead. "But our weapons can't penetrate their shields." Ilara's expression hardened. "We're not using weapons. Ramming speed." The Horizon accelerated toward the command ship, its reinforced prow aimed at a junction point in the larger vessel's structure. Behind them, the 3 remaining strike ships provided covering fire, sacrificing themselves to clear a path. "Impact in 10 seconds, Jackson announced, his voice steady despite the certainty of what would follow. "It's been an honor," Ilara said to her crew as the distance closed. The Horizon slammed into the collective command ship at relativistic speed. The quantum disruptor, housed in the reinforced prow, penetrated deep into the enemy vessel before detonating. The effect was immediate and devastating. A wave of quantum disruption spread outward from the impact point, severing the connections between all collective vessels in the system. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly drifted, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. The Confederation fleet, recognizing the opportunity, pressed the attack. Without their hive mind connection, the collective ships were still dangerous, but no longer adapted instantaneously. Individual vessels could be isolated and destroyed. 3 days later, the battle for Earth ended in victory. The collective retreated, their remaining ships jumping to faster-than-light speed in disarray. Earth had suffered tremendous damage, but it had survived. And more importantly, the disruptor technology had proven effective. In the Confederation Council chamber, now relocated to a station orbiting Jupiter due to damage to the original facility, a solemn ceremony honored those who had fallen. The Horizon and her crew were given the highest commendation, their names to be inscribed in the Hall of Remembrance alongside the greatest heroes of Confederation history. Delegate Moore, who had once dismissed humans as primitive and violent, now stood before the assembly. For 10,000 years, we congratulated ourselves on our enlightenment, our evolution beyond conflict. We thought peace was the natural state of the universe. He turned to face the remaining human representatives. We were wrong. The universe is not inherently peaceful. It is filled with predators and prey, with struggle and survival. Humans never forgot this fundamental truth, and because of that, they saved us all. Elder Venteri stepped forward. The humans reminded us of something our ancestors knew but we have forgotten. Peace is not the absence of the capacity for violence. It is the wisdom to know when that capacity is needed. In the hospital wing, Dr. Marcus Wade sat beside Kelvos, both recovering from injuries sustained during the final development of the disruptor technology. We've received reports from the outer systems, Marcus said. The collective is regrouping, adapting to counter the disruptor technology. Then we must adapt faster, Kelvos replied with newfound determination. As humans do. Marcus smiled grimly. The war isn't over. It's barely begun. But for the first time, we have hope, and the galaxy has learned not to underestimate humanity. Across the Sol system, shipyards that had once been hidden now worked openly, producing vessels of war alongside ships from a dozen Confederation worlds. Species that had never held weapons now trained alongside human instructors, learning the arts of warfare that humans had never forgotten. The galaxy had changed irrevocably. Peace would come again, but it would be a peace protected by vigilance, by readiness, by the recognition that sometimes survival required fighting. And at the center of this new understanding stood humanity, once dismissed as primitive and paranoid, now recognized as visionary, a species that had carried the ancient wisdom that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten, that sometimes, to preserve life, one must be willing to fight for it. The collective would return, stronger and more adaptive. But when they did, they would face a united galaxy that had learned humanity's most important lesson, that the price of survival is eternal vigilance, and that the most dangerous enemy is the one you never feared until it was too late.